My name is Valerie. I'm 67 years old, though I never feel my age unless someone reminds me. Most days I feel more alive than I ever did at 20. Maybe that's why people stare when I say I'm a nudist and a swinger. They expect someone younger, someone wilder, someone with less history. But the truth is, everything I am now came from a long road of trying to find out where I belonged. I was born and raised in Dayton, Ohio, a cold place for a girl who always felt like she should have been born under the Florida sun. My childhood wasn't dramatic or tragic, just quiet, strict, and small. My parents believed in rules, decorum, and staying out of trouble. I don't think they ever imagined their daughter would one day be walking around naked in a resort full of strangers, laughing like she was finally free as a little girl. I used to sneak outside at night and lie in the grass staring at the sky. Clothes always felt like a costume to me. Itchy, uncomfortable, unnecessary. But back then, you didn't say things like that. You didn't tell your mother you wanted to feel air on your skin. Or that you fantasized about a life where people weren't ashamed of their bodies. You just behaved. I was a smart kid, top of my class, the kind of girl who disappeared into books. But I wasn't popular. I had wild curly hair and a body I didn't know how to hide yet. Kids can smell difference like dogs smell fear. And they made sure I knew I didn't fit their mold. They called me names, made fun of my hair, made me feel wrong before I even knew who I was. I think that's when the seed of rebellion started growing in me quiet. Slow but steady. I left Ohio at 25. Newly married, naive, and craving warmth. My husband was steady, respectable, the kind of man who believed life was meant to be lived by the book. And for a while, I tried to be that woman, the dutiful wife, the polite hostess, the soft-spoken lady who didn't embarrass anyone. But inside, I was starving. The first time I ever stepped into a nudist resort, it felt like coming home to a version of myself I had abandoned. I remember standing there trembling as I undressed. Not from fear, from relief, no judgment, no shame, just skin sunlight. And people who weren't afraid to be real. My husband didn't understand it at first, but he loved me, and he followed. We became part of that world together. The laughter, the openness, the body acceptance that most people will never experience in their entire lives. Being naked didn't feel sexual. It felt honest. It felt like finally exhaling after years of holding my breath. But life changes people. He changed, I changed, and eventually I stepped away from the lifestyle for a while. Trying to be the normal version of myself again, the one the world preferred. It didn't last. Years later, after too much pretending and too many moments where I felt like I was shrinking inside my own life, I returned to the nudist community on my own terms. This time I felt stronger, clearer, older, and freer. And when I stepped back into that world, the sun felt the same on my skin as it did when I was 25. Maybe better. That was also when swinging entered my life naturally, almost accidentally. People imagine it's reckless or desperate. For me, it was curiosity, connection, and the simple truth of desire. I've always been honest about who I am. I don't lie, I don't sneak, and I don't betray. Everything in my life now is based on consent, communication, and freedom. People assume that once you reach a certain age, your sexuality dies. Mine didn't. If anything, it finally bloomed at 67. I have a husband and a boyfriend. I love them both in different ways, and they know it. I don't hide. I don't pretend. I don't apologize for wanting joy some. People spend their entire lives denying themselves. I spent the first half of my life doing what I was told. I'm spending the second half doing what makes me feel alive. Nudity, sensuality, connection, none of it scares me. What scares me is wasted time, unlived years, and nights spent worrying about what other people think. I didn't come to Florida to retire. People always ask me how it started. Not the nudism, but the swinging. They want a dramatic story, something wild or scandalous. But the truth is, it didn't come from chaos. It came from curiosity and honesty. I was in my early 30s the first time someone mentioned the lifestyle. It was a couple we knew, friendly, confident, always glowing. The kind of glow you only see on people who embraced who they were without apology. We were at a backyard barbecue, the kind with too much beer and too little shade. When the wife leaned in and said quietly, "You two should come to a lifestyle party sometime. You'd fit right in." My husband nearly choked on his drink. I laughed, but something in me sparked. At home that night, I brought it up again. He brushed it off, embarrassed, but I wasn't embarrassed. I wanted to understand why the idea didn't scare me. Why it felt strangely familiar, like something that had always lived under the surface. Years passed, and the invitation faded, but the seed didn't. When I finally returned to the nudist community years later, older, braver, and far more honest with myself, swinging wasn't this dark, forbidden concept. It was simply another kind of freedom offered to adults who were tired of pretending. I met my boyfriend at one of those parties, though party isn't the right word. People imagine flashing lights, thumping music, bodies piled together. It's not like that. Not for us. Lifestyle gatherings are more like soft, buzzing conversations. Warm kitchens filled with laughter. Couples holding hands. People being open about things they hide everywhere. Else, there's a gentleness to it. A respect. A shared understanding. That we're all just trying to feel alive before the clock runs out. At my first real lifestyle event, I remember walking in nervous, clutching my towel the way women clutch their handbags when they're out of place. But there was no pressure, no force, no expectation. Just people who smiled with their whole faces and said things like, "Welcome, take your time, and only do what feels good to you." Consent wasn't a rule. It was the air we breathed. You asked, you waited. You accepted no with the same grace as yes. My husband had come with me that night. Curious but cautious. We didn't play with anyone the first time. We just watched, observed, learned. And I think that was the first night. I truly understood something. Most people live behind walls. We were finally stepping outside. Swinging didn't break our marriage, but pretending to be someone I wasn't, that chipped away at me slowly. Years later, when we drifted apart, it wasn't because of jealousy or betrayal. It was because he wanted a quieter life, a smaller life. And I had tasted something too freeing to deny again. Still, we remained friends. Life doesn't have to end in bitterness if you're honest. My boyfriend came years later, a man younger than me, charming, tender, attentive. He saw me not as a woman past her prime, but as a woman in her prime because she finally stopped apologizing for existing. He knew about my husband. He knew about our lifestyle. He stepped into it without fear. People ask, don't they get jealous? I always smile. Jealousy comes from insecurity. But when you live authentically, jealousy has nowhere to hide. My husband had his own partners. My boyfriend sometimes had his own adventures. We communicated. We trusted. We enjoyed. No lies, no secrets, no shame. Some evenings, the three of us would sit together at the bar in the nudist resort, me between them, sipping a drink while both men laughed at some joke I'd told. And I remember thinking, this is what freedom looks like. This is what honesty feels like. When I tell people I'm a swinger, they assume I'm obsessed with sex. They don't understand the lifestyle isn't about sex. It's about connection, confidence, curiosity. And community. Sex is just one expression of that openness. What I love most isn't the physical part. It's the energy of a room full of people who aren't afraid to be themselves. It's the unspoken agreement that pleasure isn't sinful, that aging isn't decay. And that desire doesn't die just because the world expects it to. Swinging didn't save me, but it awakened me. It reminded me that life doesn't end at retirement, or menopause, or 60, or any of the invisible lines society draws. It reminded me that I'm allowed to choose joy, that I don't have to shrink to make others comfortable, that the body I used to hide in shame is now the body I celebrate. People think freedom comes easily. No. It's a decision you must make over and over again. and I choose it. Every day, with my husband, with my boyfriend, with myself. People have this Hollywood idea of swinger clubs, strobe lights, bodies everywhere, some chaotic tangle of desire. But the real lifestyle, it's quieter, it's warmer, it's built on rules most people in the normal world never learn. The first time I walked into a real lifestyle club, I was 30-5. My nerves were so loud, I swear the receptionist could hear them. The lobby smelled like vanilla and fresh towels. There were bowls of mints by the front desk, soft music playing the opposite of what people imagine. Inside, the lights were low, the couches plush, the air thick not with lust. But with permission. Permission to be yourself. Permission to be wanted again. Permission to stop pretending that aging means invisibility. A woman greeted me first, mid-40s, curvy, glowing with self-confidence. She said, "Relax, sweetheart. Nobody here bites unless you ask nicely. Hey?" And everyone laughed. That laughter unclenched something inside me. I think that's when I realized, okay, people come to these places because the outside world feels colder than being naked in a room full of strangers. My husband and I sat by the bar at first, whispering to each other, both excited and terrified. I told him we don't have to do anything. He nodded, grateful, because he was always the cautious one. But I was studying everything: the way couples held hands, the way people asked for consent, the way women my age walked with the confidence of 20-year-olds. The lifestyle didn't erase insecurity. Half the time, we didn't even have sex. We danced, we flirted, we laughed until our ribs hurt. We watched the night unfold like a long, slow confession. Sometimes we invited couples back to our place, not because we needed more partners, but because connection felt good. Because sharing pleasure with people who understood boundaries felt cleaner than monogamous. Relationships built on lies. People outside the lifestyle never understand that part. They think swinger equals reckless. But the truth is, lifestyle people are some of the most emotionally intelligent humans I've ever met. They know how to communicate, how to negotiate, how to say no without guilt, how to say yes without shame. I've seen couples fall apart because they entered the lifestyle for the wrong reasons, trying to fix something broken, trying to outrun jealousy, trying to fill a void. The lifestyle doesn't fix anything. It only reveals what was already there. But I've also seen couples grow stronger, healed by honesty, revived by adventure, bonded by trust. One night stands out in my memory like a movie scene. My boyfriend and I were at a club in Tampa, dim lights, warm air, boaties glowing after hours in the jacuzzi. A couple we liked joined us in the playroom. We weren't even touching yet, just talking, breathing, laughing, when the woman suddenly took my hand and said, "You're beautiful." Do you know that? I didn't, not really. Not after years of feeling like my body was something to hide, not celebrate. But the way she said it, without envy, without competition, without agenda, it made something inside me soften. Later that night, while I lay beside my boyfriend, I whispered, "I feel like myself here." He kissed my shoulder and said, "That's because nobody's pretending here." And he was right. Outside clubs, people perform for the world, perform success, perform morality, perform confidence. Inside, people drop the act. They aren't perfect. They aren't flawless. They're real bodies. Skin that had never felt air before suddenly felt alive. No one stared, no one judged, no one cared about cellulite. Scars, wrinkles, age, everyone just existed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't performing. What surprised me most was not the nudity, it was the laughter. Real laughter, not polite dinner party smiles. People were open, uninhibited, joyful, almost youthful. It was like shedding your clothes meant shedding your fear. That night, lying next to my husband in our resort room, I cried. He asked why. I said, because I finally met the version of myself I lost at 16. That was the beginning. Over the next 25 years, the lifestyle became our shared secret. Not betrayal, agreement, not cheating, connection, not chaos. Honesty. People think swingers are anti-love. But in my experience, Most married people cheat. Swingers communicate. But it wasn't perfect. Somewhere along the way, I realized something. My desires were changing faster than his. He remained happy with occasional parties. Occasional couples, I wanted more community, more freedom, more connection. And instead of fighting, we evolved. When I was 64, we made the hardest and kindest decision of our lives. We opened our marriage fully. He stayed my husband. But I was allowed to have a partner. 2. That's when I met David, the man who would become my boyfriend. People judge that word boyfriend at my age. But what they don't understand is this. Aging doesn't erase. People hear that number and expect fragility, knitting needles, the quiet rhythm of retirement. But my life didn't get loud until I got older. I live in a nudist swinger community now, a place where the sun hits your skin before judgment does, a place where bodies are just bodies, not weapons or sins. And for me, that freedom feels like breath after holding it for 50 years. But it wasn't always like this. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a house where everything was proper, tight-zipped, silent. My parents believed in rules, modesty, and God in that order. My sisters and I were raised to fold our hands, cross our legs, and never ask questions about the things adults whispered behind closed doors. I married at 20. A good girl does that. My husband, Thomas, was gentle, stable, kind. Everything a respectable life required. We built a quiet marriage, work, dinners, church, bills, holidays. And for a long time, I thought contentment was the same thing as happiness. But somewhere in my mid-30s, I started to feel a hunger I didn't have a name for. A kind of restlessness. A pull under my ribs. It wasn't about sex at first. It was about aliveness. I felt like I'd been half awake for decades. Like my body and my spirit weren't speaking the same language anymore. And that terrified me because I didn't know how to want anything for myself. When I turned 40, everything changed. A coworker invited me and my husband to a lifestyle gathering. I didn't even know what that meant. He did. He said no immediately. I said nothing. But that night when he went to bed, I looked it up. Nudist.swingers.open partnerships. People laughing, people touching, people not hiding. It was like staring through a window at a world I wasn't allowed to. And at this age, when society expects you to shrink, quiet down, fade into the background, I feel more alive, more curious, and more myself than I ever did at 20-5. People think the lifestyle is only about sex. They're wrong. Sex is the language, not the message. The message is freedom. But freedom carries weight after 30 years in the nudist and swinger community. I understand something I wish someone had told me when I was young. People are terrified of freedom because it demands honesty, and honesty is the one thing most marriages, most families, most individuals are not built to hold. I wasn't either, not at first. When you live naked, literally or emotionally, you stop hiding behind fabric, roles, or excuses. You meet yourself in the mirror without the mask you've worn your whole life. For me, that mirror showed the young girl I used to be, the one with the wild laugh, the curious heart, the body that wasn't yet policed by shame. She had been buried under decades of be nice, be proper, be modest, be a wife, be a mother, be grateful. She is finally breathing again, but not everything is easy. My son struggles with my choices. He loves me. I know that, but he doesn't understand me. He tells me, "Mom, can't you just settle down now? Act your age." I laugh and say I am acting my age. I'm acting like a woman who earned the right to be who she is. He shakes his head, but he hugs me. Love, even confused love, matters. My grandson. He thinks I'm cool, but keeps a safe distance from knowing details. Fine by me, every generation processes freedom differently. As for my husband, Thomas, our love is quiet now, gentle, familiar. Some nights we sit together on the patio and talk about the past, the years we raised our son, the vacations, the arguments, the laughter. He thanks me for not leaving.